What up, people? How are we doing? The big one today, electrolytes. Are they a scam? Or are they the super supplement that they promise to be? This is the latest debate in the fitness industry. You know, these electrolytes, they've been around for fucking years. Gatorade, Lucozade, and there's probably products way before then, back in the day. Even something as simple as salted water and a banana. But they've really come to the forefront of training, nutrition, exercise right now because there's so many brands that are up and coming promoting the electrolytes that they sell as the new legal steroid. So let's see what it's all about. I have done a little bit of research. Now I'll admit I've not gone into the complete depths because that's not how I roll. I like to get my information from podcasts, from looking at studies or studies that study studies, and you know, really just getting a good overview of analysis so I can give you the sort of simples rather than giving you all the sciencey information. There's guys out there who are going to do that for you. I know you're not interested in that. You just want to hear a guy without his shirt on tell you whether or not that you should be taking these supplements, because we ain't got time to think. We ain't got the time to go into the crevice. We have to just know the answer, right? So let's get to it. Okay, so electrolytes, what do they promise and what are the top brands? Now, you might have heard of things like LMNT, Liquid IV, and Noon. Personally, I've been a user of LMNT. Now, I'll admit, I was suckered into the electrolyte sort of field. Now, it does have its pros, and we will get into that, but I, again, through their clever marketing strategies, through, again, podcasts that I would listen to and I thought were very, very reputable, and they are still very, very reputable. Maybe they just fell into the same category as me when they were just sort of, you know, tricked into thinking they were the next best thing, when really we've had the opportunity at the palm of our hands through simple dietary additions or, you know, following a healthy balanced diet. Essentially, they claim to be 2 to 3 times better hydration than just standard water. They create less fatigue and cramps whilst training. They lead to faster recovery, and I think that was the most sort of compelling argument that people would start taking these. They wanted to recover faster. They wanted to feel like they had more energy during their workouts, and they wanted to perform better. Now, the problem is, like most supplements, they are an inflated price compared to what you could probably get naturally if you just put a little bit of extra thought into how you consume products. At the same time, you know, LMNT, I was bought in by the delicious flavors. You know, they did a hot product and a cold product. The hot product very well mixed into things like my coffee and would make it taste like chocolate raspberry or chocolate vanilla, and the cold products would make my sort of water or juice taste like an exotic mocktail. So that's what really grasped my attention about it, and it gave me the placebo that I was performing better. Maybe I was performing slightly better, but there was no need to be spending £40-50 a month on these fancy sachets. So let's get into, you know, essentially the science behind them. All right, and again, I'm not going to quote papers. If you want to go into the, you know, like the details and things, as I say, there's podcasts and other videos and proper scientists that are going to do that for you. I got most of my information, again, like I say, from the podcast that I listen to, just to kind of quote some. Mike Israel's podcast, Renaissance Periodization. We've also got Mind Pump, who are a big advocate for LMNT. I've also listened to James Smith's podcast. The recent one is a really, really good podcast, basically going through, you know, he invited a guest on there who is an expert in this field, and he basically broke it down into simple terms of how they are useful and how they're not useful. And he was on the side of electrolytes being a little bit of a scam for the general population, because that's where they're selling them to. They're not selling them to the high-level athlete. They're not selling them to the person who is, you know, running ultra marathons. They're selling them to the general gym goer. All right, and you've got to consider most people watching this video are probably a general gym goer. Let's face it, like, gym sessions aren't incredibly tough. There might be a few of you out there who listen to this that are, you know, really, really into your sort of more endurance sports or sports like CrossFit, where you're sweating a lot. You might live in a hot, humid country, again, where you're perspirating a lot during your workouts. But most of the time, you're going to be in an air-conned gym. Your sets are going to last no more than 30 seconds, in most cases 20 seconds or less. And you're not really taking your heart rate and your body to a point where it needs to start sweating profusely to obviously keep you cool, which is where, in my opinion and the science's opinion, where electrolytes really come in handy. So essentially they are made of some essential nutrients such as sodium, and that's for the perspiration. That is the main ingredient. Sodium coming from, you might know it as salt. Obviously sodium is one of the molecules within salt, the main component of that. You also got magnesium, potassium and calcium, and these three are more suited for the muscular recovery. So recovery in between sessions and recovery actually during the session as well. So as I said, the science has sort of come to the conclusion that they are useful for longer sweaty sessions, usually 1 to 2 hours. Or if you are in a particularly humid country and you're doing a workout which raises the heart rate enough where you are literally dripping, such as me this morning during a 25-minute, 26-minute workout it took for me, maybe they come in use then to keep you hydrated, essentially. But as I say, I'm going to get into how you can make your life a hell of a lot cheaper, but still get the same, if not even better results. They are helpful for low sodium diets, and this is typically for the really, really healthy eater, the person that eats. I could just spat on myself then. At least I've got enough water in the body to do that. But they are more helpful for people with low sodium diets. As I say, people who are basically on a very, very maybe restricted whole food based diet where they're not adding salts naturally. This will be a way of bringing those sodium and salt levels up within the blood. But they're not useful for most general workouts. Like I said, if you just go to the gym, and you do a push-pull legs split or, a typical bodybuilder split or whatever, you're just lifting some weights through the week, they're probably not going to be much use to you. Again, like most supplements. And I'm telling you this because I want you to save your money and actually spend it on things that are useful. You can apply for my coaching. The link will be in the description and on my Instagram channel. There's something more useful for you. However, they do create a placebo effect. Guilty as charged. I was suckered into that one. And if you're a pro athlete, I don't think there's any pro athletes watching me. I'm probably the most pro athlete, and that's saying something on this video. Then yes, you've probably got a reason to use electrolytes. But they've been around for years. They're not a new fancy Ferrari that have just come out of the wilderness. So are they a scam? Now, as I say, the price is pretty ludicrous. I was spending for 30 sachets, so basically you'd have 1 or 2 a day, depending if it was, a double training day or not. And I think 30 sachets was around 50 Great British pounds. It's quite a lot of money, considering, other things that you've essentially got to pay for and would, bring you more benefit. And when you can actually get the same, if not even better results by just salting your water a little bit and eating a banana either before or during your workout, is it really worth the money? Possibly not. They are generally overhyped, just as every other supplement on the market is, because you've got to think, these people are trying to sell a product. They're going to make it sound like the biggest, fanciest necessity that you need to add to your gym bag. Otherwise, why the hell would you buy them? So you've always got to sort of err on the side of caution that they're maybe inflating some of the claims that they are making. And essentially, I think before you buy any supplement, you should do the due diligence to actually discover whether they are going to be useful for you or not. Of course, they come in fancy packaging. They use fancy marketing tactics, messages. They use high-level athletes and, reputable people within the industry to promote their products. And that's how they get you on board. Because, of course, you're going to listen to the guy who's won the Premier League several times. You're going to listen to the world heavyweight champions or the champions of their sport because they are at the top of the game. But guess what? They're getting paid millions to promote these products. So, of course, they're going to have a reason to emphasize them. All right? Otherwise, they ain't going to get the gigs. They ain't going to get the money. Just as if I was to tell you, promote my coaching service and I'll give you £1,000 for every person that signs up. You're going to promote that whole coaching service even if you'd never used it or I was a shit coach. I'm not a shit coach, by the way. But you get my drift. Finally, though, this is probably the most worrying. If you are an average person, and I mean someone who is, you maybe like to go to the gym a couple times a week, but you're not really serious about it. Maybe your diet isn't the best and you're eating a lot of processed foods. Maybe, there's a few takeaways over the weekend. Maybe you're someone who just likes to add salt to everything they eat, and I know a lot of people that do that. You actually risk that, pose a risk to yourself that you're going to overconsume on sodium, which can lead to high blood pressure, which can then lead to other health ailments. As you know, we're all high blood pressure related to, cardiovascular diseases and whatnot in later life. So that's the scary part. If you are just sort of average Joe and you think that these are going to level up your training, yet you're already sort of consuming more than enough sodium, if not too much, it's not a good, it's not a good road to go down. So the pros and cons of electrolytes, again, really, really broken down and simplified. The pros are, it's convenient. Like I said, with the LMNT sachets, they were just there in a sachet. I'd rip it open, pour it into my drink, done. But you've got to think of it this way, like, is it really that hard to make a glass of water, put a little bit of pink Himalayan salt in, rip off a banana from the bunch that you've got and use that? There's not really much difference. I think the convenience is probably less because I've got to wait for that LMNT to be delivered. I've got to order it for the amount of money it is, and then remember to take it. Of course, for our endurance athletes, as I say, someone who is going to be continuously training for more than 1 hour at a high intensity, or an intensity enough to basically make you sweat, it's going to be useful because it will help with water retention. It will reduce muscular cramps and fatigue, so you can continue and last for longer in your workout and perform at a better level. However, the cons, and this is where you need to really, really consider, is it actually worthwhile your investment and health? They are super overpriced for what they are. Let's think about it this way. They're just a fancy way of flavouring your drink and getting something that you can get for a fraction of the price through the salted water and banana method. As I say, it's not for most people, even though that's who it's marketed to. And the real sort of worry is that it's a risk of sodium overload for a lot of people who are probably taking these products or probably being targeted with these products. In my opinion, and in the opinion of science, real food is always better. And even down to the fact of protein powder. Protein powder is a legitimate supplement, one that actually works, one that actually does a job. But if you can hit your protein levels through natural whole foods, you're going to get way better benefit because of the other macronutrients that come with that, the vitamins, the minerals, and the actual food element. It's only effective in terms of its, for its use for long, sweaty workouts. And as I say, most people in the general population are not doing a long, intense, sweaty workout and have a low sodium diet. All right? Because I can guarantee the people that do have those long, sweaty workouts and are just kind of pushing themselves on the treadmill and doing those stupid Les Mills HIIT classes, don't talk about that, we can talk about that another day. They are not healthy in terms of their diet, and they're probably eating a lot of salt already. So yeah, something to consider there, but that is the pros and cons really, really broken down and simplified for you. What do you actually need to know? Because again, I could tell you, a bunch of information that's just going to go in one ear and out the other, or I can give you the no BS approach, the no sugarcoating approach, the stuff that's really you can take away, apply, and then use it to make an informed decision. So it's not a total scam. All right, like I said, it has got its uses. And if you are someone that falls into the category of a sport where you are perspirating a lot, where it does last for over an hour, where you are performing at a high level, and some examples here are high rocks, CrossFit, martial arts, general endurance workouts, and maybe your team sports, then there you go. Not for the average gym goer. For most people, I'd suggest just focus on real hydration tactics. Make sure that you're getting, minimum 3 litres of water in per day. If you are a larger human, 6 foot plus, then aim for 4 litres. And obviously, the bigger you are, the more sort of water you have. So I just say, just try and, consistently and frequently rehydrate yourself with drinking. Whole foods as well are going to add to that. Fruit, as you know, super juicy. Therefore, you're hydrating yourself. Like I think oranges and tangerines and that family of fruit are one of the most hydrating, if not watermelon as well. Melons are really hydrating. So if you're getting a good amount of those throughout a day as well, that's going to add to your hydration too. Have you used them before though? Because I'd love to hear your anecdotal feedback. As I say, at the time when I first started taking them, I actually felt a benefit. But now I reflect on and since I had a break. So just to kind of give you a bit of a background story, I first started taking them before my first trip to Asia, right? And I had some left over, so I took some with me when I first went to Thailand. Therefore, I was sweating a lot when I was working out, and they had their use. And I noticed when I ran out, my performance started to drop. but I couldn't get any out there because I was only there for a short amount of time. You know, I might have had some isolated drinks and electrolyte based drinks that did help in my workouts, but when I got home I had none left. So then I got them, and at this point I started adding salt proactively to my meals because I cook a lot of food from scratch, use a lot of whole foods, rarely eat takeaways, rarely eat packaged frozen foods. So again, salt is not naturally occurring in these foods, so I would purposely add salt to every meal. And then I started taking the electrolytes again, and I didn't really feel any difference. I just thought, oh, maybe it's like my body is used to it now that I don't actually notice it, but I'm performing better. And then I ran out again, and there was no changes. I just continued to do what I was doing in my normal diet, continuing to focus on hydration, and there was no noticeable performance drop in what I was doing. So that was my feedback, but I'd be interested to hear anyone, particularly from the endurance sports, and maybe some people from, if you're an average gym goer, bodybuilding style training where you're not really sweating, and therefore we can sort of make a decision. Like anything, even if it is a placebo and it helps you perform better, then it's got its use. But I'm just trying to help you make a better informed decision and not waste your money. So my verdict is I was sucked in by the fancy packaging, by the delicious flavors, by the promoters of people who I trusted, and they might have been doing it off their own back in terms of they actually believed in the product. But now, and as I said, when I sort of reflect upon it, I didn't notice too much difference, and my training is appropriate. Maybe not in the winter months, CrossFit, I don't tend to get that sweaty, but, coming back out here to Asia and training, but still focusing on salting foods and whatnot, doesn't have much use. My verdict is save your money, salt your water or salt your juice and have a banana, because spend your money elsewhere on my training, on my program. It's not that much. Just hit the link in my bio and you'll see, and we can talk from there. Oh, and by the way, I'm offering a free week of training for anyone who is interested in signing up. No obligation to continue, but I promise you're going to get some good value out of it. There we have it. Peace.